Good evening and welcome to Behind the Headlines. My name is Timothy Nyangweso. Why have elections in this country become a do or die, or as many have said, a bloodshed? Especially if you look at the by-elections that have happened between 2021 and 2025. 10 by-elections have happened and 3 have caught our eye. Especially if you look at Soroti, Oyam, and coming all the way to Kawempe, that is the most recent. But also the apathy of voters to be able to show up and vote is the biggest question. Will this be the trend come 2026? We look at the trends, the behaviors, but also the projections of 2026 if the Kasiki of Kawempe is anything to go by. Tonight, that's where our focus is, especially pivoting from the Electoral Commission to what 2026 will look like, but also the implications of the just concluded by-elections there. Let me introduce the panel. On my immediate left, Professor Sarah Sally, the director at the Institute of Gender and Social Development Studies at Makerere University. Good evening, Professor, and it's good to have you.
Thank you very much. Good evening, Timothy, and good evening, our viewers. I'm happy to be here.
Next to Professor is, I was about to say Honorable, Counsel Nicholas Opio, the founder of Chapter 4 Uganda and also a human rights activist at that. Good evening, Counsel, and it's good to have you.
The pleasure is all mine. Good evening, and good evening to all the viewers.
There's normally a comment you make when you're seated in that seat, so today does it suffice?
No. Today my mind is preoccupied with the 3rd anniversary of the passing of the Honorable Speaker, Jacob Oulanyah.
Oh.
I think the country dearly misses him.
I saw something of a lecture to be happening soon.
Unfortunately, I'm told that Parliament has postponed that lecture. But many of us who were close to him today spent the evening on a Twitter space, just remembering what I thought was a great man who died at a time when the country dearly needed him. You can see the quality of leadership in Parliament, and what we miss is really very clear.
Is it still the People's Parliament, as he called it?
Well, the People's Parliament is really, and perhaps people who know political science will tell you, it is the representation of the House as a structure. The conduct of the members notwithstanding. In other countries, they call it a deliberative house. And so, in that sense, it is still the symbol of an arm of government. It's supposed to be the space in which people's views are discussed objectively and some solutions are arrived at. So in that sense, yes, but we can discuss the conduct of parliamentarians and the conduct of Parliament another day.
Okay. Next to Counsel Nicholas Opio is Mr. Waiswa Mufumbiro, who is with us here. He is the Deputy Spokesperson of the National Unity Platform. Good evening, Waiswa, and it's good to have you.
I'm very humbled to be here. With an addition to today's debate.
And also a happy belated birthday. I know it was 2 days ago, you and your brother. Yes.
Over 80.
Yes, over 80. It's good to have you, and may you live to see long life. We have gone with long life. We'll come to the government later. Next to him is Flight Captain Francis Edward Babu, a senior citizen at that. Good evening, sir, and it's good to have you.
Good evening. I'm thrilled to see Africans going to Qatar for mediation. If Africans can leave Africa to go to Qatar for mediation, we are really advanced now. No, I'm not. I mean, I am surprised. We have the East African Community, we have the SADC, we have everything, but the Emir, is it Emir or the of Qatar, is the chairman between 2 great men in Africa.
Okay.
This must be an achievement.
Very cynical in that statement, but we'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
Honorable James Kakoza, representing us at the East African Legislative Assembly under the NRM. Good evening, sir, and it's good to have you here for the first time.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Timos. Good evening, viewers. I'm happy to be here today, this evening.
It's good to have you. We have missed the Deputy Secretary General of the National Resistance Movement. She had an emergency and she asked the Honorable James Kakoza to come and be able to sit in to answer a few questions in that direction. You can be part of the show. Go to our YouTube channel, drop your comments there, or to our handle, X handle there, hashtag UBC Behind the Headlines. The number is 0709 60 25 92 for text and WhatsApp. Let's get this conversation started. But before we do that, let me give you some numbers. A few months ago, we were here with both Honorable Jimmy Akena, and we also had the Honorable Secretary General of the NRM, and both Richard Todong and Akena were here to answer questions, especially when we came out of Oyam. And Oyam's numbers then looked like about 35,000 people. No, 120,000 people, voters were supposed to be there. About 15,000 voted for appeal, and 15,100 voted for the NRM. That was about 30,000 people, 25% of the electorate showed up. When we go to Soroti, it had 36,000 people, 9,407 voted for the NRM, 8,771 voted for the opposition there. 15,000 people showed up. That was about 50-50. Kawempe, which is most recent, 171,000 people, voters that we're talking about there. 17,000 voted for the National Unity Platform, 8,000 for the NRM, giving us between 13 and 14% of the voters. 2021, 18 million voters, only 10 million voted, 8 million did not show up. 2026, 15 million voters, 5 million didn't show up. Now let's get to the gist of this conversation. Honorable Kakoza, it's only befitting that I come to you. With the figures I have given, you have been part of the electoral process in this country for a while. 2016, 2021, the 10 by-elections between 2021 to date. What do you make of our elections in this country in hindsight, looking at the agenda of 2026? If anything is to go by the 3 by-elections I've mentioned, Soroti, Oyam, and Kawempe.
I think, you know, the environment dictates the trend of the day. If you go by the school of Kevin Scholes. You see, when you compare when we were in individual merit, you remember in the movement system, we had a different story. When we came in 2005, in the multi-party setting, we thought that maybe participation in activities of voting our leaders, but now it's becoming so high, to the extent that all these by-elections you've mentioned are just being mingled with a lot of violence. So that means publicly, people are becoming aware, not as it was before. Because when you compare the by-elections of 2005, 2011, 2000, as you've mentioned, 2016, now 2021, now. The only problem that really, which we need to understand and analyze properly, that in by-elections, people tend to concentrate not the same as the general elections. Because in general elections, everybody is running for his survival. And some members show that the party activities in a constituency, not as it is now. When you come for a by-election, you find that all the parties come and converge, the headquarters of the parties are there, and so many things happen in a by-election.
But Honorable, your primaries in 2021 were some of the most violent. And when you look at the by-elections as they go on, if you look at clips of Oyam by-election, between Honorable Akena and your Secretary General Todong, sorry, and your electoral chairperson, Dr. Tango Doi, very harsh words going across there. Why has the election in this country, let it be a by-election or an election, become a matter of do or die?
Let me start with that one of primaries of 2021. That was a challenge for multipartyism, and on the side of our party, we had a weakness. Because remember, each party must register its own members. And you must have a solid register that in primaries, whoever comes to vote, you know that's a party elections. But all of a sudden something happened, and then they said everybody should do what? Should vote the last 2 days to primaries. And for me, I think that was a big, big mistake. That which I think now, right now, the primaries of NRM, we've got a very, very good registers. The numbers are known. The structures are going to be there. We think that what happened, that mistake will be corrected this time around, that we've prepared early. When you look at the harsh words and used in campaigns, I think people, the people who are participating in politics, the trend and the credibility, the maturity, I think they are taking a wrong note.
Why have you as the NRM allowed the electoral process in this country to degrade to this law?
No. It's not only the NRM which participate in elections.
You are in power. You are government.
No, even if, no, a party is different from a state apparatus, my friend.
Honorable,
a party is different from a state apparatus. You must know it.
The letter from the president says some people really miscalculated to think that they can commit such crimes against the law and the people when the NRM is in charge. So are you saying the NRM is not in charge of this country and you're not?
No. You see, the president's view is the head of a party, too, and is the head of a government. So his analysis is both. So you cannot say that we are the ones who are leading the grading of the campaigns of parties and whatever.
Neither are you stopping it.
No. You know, human beings, you don't think that you're operating like you're operating like you go in your bedroom, you pick a shirt, you do whatever you want. Human beings are not animals. That you tie one animal in the morning, in the evening you'll find it behaving the same way. They can change. So I think what I need on the bottom line, that really we must be cautious, all of us who participate in elections and who participate in politics. Politics is not a do or die. No, it's the way how you convince people to give you a vote. But people go beyond that, which is abnormal. I don't think it's okay. Because if I don't agree ideologically with you, I don't start abusing you. I don't start provoking you. So I think it's a general perception of the public that we really need to have a control of us who participate in elections, that we should respect each other. Somebody might have a different view, but it doesn't mean that you have to disrespect that person.
Before I come to Captain Babu, let me get to Waiswa, because both of you, your parties were at the helm of this. These by-elections, 2021 to 2026, the senior I'm coming to.
And then in senior. Yes, sir.
Waiswa, you have been part of a number of by-elections. You have seen how the escalation of violence has been. I know you were even on the ground for the past Kawempe North election there. What do you make of our by-elections, and what does that translate to 2026?
I think there has been a trend, there has been a change of mind about democracy to the people who are in charge of the country now. If you look at what is the common denomination in all this chaos, it is the state, it is the NRM government. Where it doesn't have support, it will unleash tyranny, it will unleash terror, it will unleash impunity. And that is exactly what you have seen in the Kawempe by-election. They talk about provocation, but even where they have not been provoked, once they know that it is not their backyard, they will make it as ugly as you saw the Kawempe by-election. We can decide to be intellectually dishonest, run to escapism on the realities of what is the fact, but I want you to agree that the people in charge of our security apparatus are either sick in their heads or there is a missing point, without a doubt. I will begin with the nomination day of Nalukola. First of all, in the morning, his agent is abducted by security operatives with his nominating documents, because you need to prepare as a candidate for nomination. He's abducted and whisked away. And we effect Plan B. The signatures are supposed to be given to us right there at the Electoral Commission offices, but this has been done by security. And the Electoral Commission is a toothless barking dog in this. Successfully, the candidate is nominated. He is asked by security not to use his car. He obliges, he uses foot. They tell him not to walk. He obliges, takes a boda. They pull him off a boda. This is a candidate. He's pulled off a boda down into the trench. Imagine if Honorable Nalukola had hit his head, he would not have survived. He would be speaking about something different today. And that is unprofessionalism. First, wait to discuss the deployment of that security apparatus in an electoral process, which has been ruled upon by all electoral petitions in Uganda, including the Supreme Court, where you have a ruling of the Supreme Court giving guidelines on how elections must, because it was a must be conducted to be free and fair. Who are the people in charge of making this process free and fair? They're those that are in charge of government. What are they doing? They have given a deaf eye. They are holding this country in contempt of court since the ruling in the Amama Mbabazi case. This country has been held in contempt of court because all the decisions, all the remedies given by the Supreme Court were abused simply because they want to pretend over impunity, that even what can be made legal and fair, they will not oblige. When we went for our first rally, at the gate, that is where we were stopped. Our young people, supporters, members, leaders, members of parliament at that, mayors were arrested. Others for donning red overalls. And what is very disheartening and disturbing is that as they were arresting NUP people at their offices for donning red, the NRK candidate was donning a yellow overall. So it makes it cynical, hypocritical and ironical that an NRM candidate can be escorted in an overall with a tractor on the road doing a procession, and then the opponent is being dehumanized, is being battered, is being tortured, is being treated as a non-citizen in a constitutional process, and that is unacceptable. We are talking about breaking people's legs. We are talking about breaking people's backs, and it does not stop even to the politics. It is so archaic that it even goes to it goes as far as attacking the fourth estate, that is the media. In this debacle, because there was no violence from the citizens, nobody will tell you, apart from a mad minister who will tell you that people had 6 lorries of stones carried.
He's not here to defend himself.
No. I've not particularly said it may be a minister in Tanzania. you quick. I'm talking about a minister who said that we had lorries of stones. Even their own answers are vague. They can only be said by people who don't have shame. That members who are putting on JAT, holding guns, were members of the National Unity Platform. And we still are here trying to macerate the truth, which we all know. Yesterday I appeared with one who was in the theater on behalf of the NRA. and that is the vice chairman of Buganda, Kawanda. He admits that they were defeated squarely. At Mbogo, I was there, Mbogo Mosque, on polling day. They deployed Mambas. Now, Mambas are accustomed to guerrilla, things like wars in Somalia. It was deployed at a polling station, commandeered by two people, Honorable Balam Bargahare and Honorable Misa Kawanda. What were they doing at 4 o'clock with the Mambas arriving? Because this is on camera. They had blacked out the election by beating and chasing you, the mainstream, but then the citizen reporting went on well. After that, they had finished counting of the votes. Balam commandeered the kicking. They brought in goons with an NRM ambulance, which now I'm told is an ambulance of the NRM Youth Brigade. It brought in the youth, goons, and they were commandeered by Baram to kick and vandalize government property. Now that is criminal. It's the highest form of criminality. A person sitting in cabinet vandalizing government stores. That is worse than Mabati, stealing Mabati.
After this whole ordeal you have gone through, what does that mean for 2026 for you?
Before we jump to 2026, man, these are human beings we are talking about. We cannot begin discussing post when there are challenges we are facing now. People like Francis Nsano have not managed to eat up to today. Now, that is not a politician I'm speaking for. It's not NUP, and I'm being deliberate. Abeka Luoa, he's limping up today. He's a journalist. He went to school, got a job, he's doing his job, and he's being picked selectively, taken to torture chambers, tortured to the maximum, held up to the wee hours of the evening, picked at 10 a.m. Members of parliament. Now, this is not an attack on 2026. It is an attack on constitutionalism. Our constitution stipulates, the lawyers will tell you, that recalling the history, that's our preamble, there is a particular history we went through. The rebels that took the gun in 1986 were inspired by abductions. Are they abducting people today? Yes.
I get that, and we have discussed that audio, and I hear you. Isano, Abubakar, all the way to Miracle, we know, and we stand with them as the media fraternity. The question is, after you have seen accusations that have been made against the NUP, ballot stuffing, you are making them in Jinja and all these things. When you look at 2026, what does it look like in your lens?
You see, that's what I said, intellectual dishonesty. Who is in charge of elections in this country? Do you know how much a ballot costs? Just one ballot. How much would that cost? What would be the abilities of NUP to invest in an election of 10 days? In an election of 10 days, invest, look for how you can forge ballot papers, and then why, if we knew that Nalukola would not need to be voted, why would we even go through all other processes if we are thinking about cheating? That kind of intellectual dishonesty from the NRA, running away from the actual catastrophe they have caused to this country, is what I find difficult to discuss. Okay. I would rather tell you that whatever they are doing, you talked about the numbers. This deployment, my friend, when you are a voter and you have a whole convoy of over 15 vehicles, military vehicles deployed in war zone, now on ground against voters, because it was like they were against the voters. Okay. Many of them they will be disenfranchised. Nobody will go out to vote when he's going to be caned. Nobody will go out to vote when he's awaiting to be assassinated. Okay,
allow me bring in Honorable Captain Babu. Honorable, when you look, you have been around, you were a senior citizen, you have seen to even the making of this constitution. When you look at our by-elections and elections, what are your reflections?
No, unfortunately for me, I'm slightly going to take you to another direction before we go to these skirmishes you're talking about. Very unfortunate. We have a problem as a country, and it's a big problem. And people have been glossing over it for some time. First and foremost, I want you to know, that Uganda was not made by the Ugandans. It was made by a man in Berlin who was sitting in a chair. And he took all the tribes of this area and put them in this enclosure we now call Uganda. To an extent that some of our brothers and sisters were just left outside those borders. In between, when the king had a birthday, he would give one part of their country to another, and so we ended up with certain parts. By 1905 is when they made the final boundaries of Uganda. The people in Uganda, the gentleman who ruled this country, that is the British, he never united us at all. He left us as we're in a country where he was concentrating on Kampala with Buganda, and the rest would come after. So there has been a problem for those 70 years he ruled. He never brought the people together. He then ruled us from London, council in order. They would make the laws in London to rule us here. First, they gave it to a private company, which had the administration. Then it handed it back to the British government, and we became a protectorate. What apparently has happened, and nobody wants to talk about this, is that they concentrated to fight among themselves, to make us fight among ourselves. When they failed on tribe, after Bunyoro and Buganda had fought, they went into religion. And there was religious wars here. But you know, Ugandans are very smart. By 1919, a young group led by a man called ZM Sentongo started a revolution. Indians with cotton ginning and so on and so forth. So the young people did not start today. I want to bring that point out. They started some years back. So we come all the way to in between there was a lot of pull and push on land, starting from 1900. A lot of people here had differences because of land. Unluckily for all of us, they concentrated in the central, which was Buganda then, on the land issue. They divided it, gave it to big people, they gave it to certain king, the big men in the king's palace. They divided 8 square miles each. So that became a war now between the local leaders of the clans and the great men. So that has been our politics. By 1950, we had a problem. The British were Protestant, and they wanted everybody in leadership to be a Protestant. The Catholic had come, and the Kabaka had given them Rubaga. These people, they made them fight each other, but eventually they found a way out and resolved after King Mwanga got his throne back. The British were not happy with him. They took him out. Young people died because they said they wanted to overthrow the Kabaka then. So this thing of government against the people has not started today. In the 1950s there, the people started fighting for land, at the same time fighting for business of selling cotton and like that to the Indians. So the two parties that came out, which was initially UNC and DP, came out on those bases. Most of the people in those parties were young. I want you to get this point very clear. But they were started on religious basis. So when the British wanted to bring here the Federation of East Africa, and which was refused by most Ugandans, they were very unhappy. They said, how can the two parties be led by only Baganda? So they brought a third axis by bringing Obote from Kenya and joining UNC and dividing it into parties, UPC and UNC. Eventually UNC disappeared. And then we come to the Legico. Again, I'm going to accelerate all the way up to independence. At independence, only 2 people were above 30. It was the Kabaka and Obote. The rest were below 30. Again, the youth. So I want you to get the picture that it is not the youth that people are talking about. You are going to talk about behavior now. People who tell you people reacted. In the 1960s, before our election, 1962, people here destroyed people's farms by cutting all their banana plantations. It was a party problem. Parties were fighting. So the trend, as I'm bringing the pattern now, people here have been demonstrating by creating fear into others in politics. And it has not started today. So the trend of the British divide and rule system, which we now inherited, because as far as we're concerned, if you look at the people who got independence, they did not get independence for Uganda. They replaced the British who had been ruling Uganda. They replaced the British. The system is not even ours. The democracies did not evolve from us. So we are now going into a system, and we want to make it ours. To make it ours, we have to sit down and find out where are the weaknesses. And we have to be sincere. So to get all these problems we are talking about coming up, you'll find that this election, the reason they have 5 years elections, I'm not going to the trend now, it's argued that holding a regular, free and fair elections, the hallmark of building a democracy. Which democracy? We have to understand each other. Our politics is based on sectarianism, ethnicity. It's based on young and old. It's based on rich and poor. It's based against one tribe against the other. And the people who are in the leadership of politics, they use this to fight. In fact, those parties, the reason why they formed them on religious basis, they could not form them on tribal basis because one tribe could not go the whole of Uganda, but the religion could. So some people formed them on those bases. Those became the tires. So we come now. Where does all these problems come from we have today? They have inherently been there. If you look at all our problems we've been having in Uganda from 1962 up to now, virtually it's the same. They are fighting the same way. We don't understand parties. We don't understand democracy. We are not willing to learn. And we've got to sit down and go back on the table and say, where have we gone wrong? And where we have gone wrong is one, we are not united. So the smart politicians play on that divide and rule. In fact, people who have written the pattern of voting in this country will give you how people vote. And they will give you those patterns. And most of it is on sectarian basis. So when people create those, they think, they do it purposely. It's not that they don't know what's right and what's wrong. They purposely do it, and people start fighting each other. In every election, and I want to end up with this one.
Yes.
People have, in competition, people have a tendency to get frightened. And these are the things they do. Either they use money, they use propaganda, they use blackmail, they use intimidation. These have been there all the time. And we've got to sit down and say, how do we resolve these problems we are talking about? And by the way, all the political parties have got this problem. And I'm warning them now. If we don't sit down and resolve this thing like good people, we're in a lot of trouble. A party has two functions. One, to get us a good leader. Two, to get us a good program. A program to manage a nation. Now, most parties, they wait there. It's like a market. Those who come to buy, they say, no, you can be an MP. You are supposed to go on leadership drive and get leaders.
Okay.
So, to me, we have failed to get very good leaders, and some of our leaders have played the kind of things a young man here has been talking about, and a few others. We've got many others. Now, let me end up with this one. To stop all this nonsense, if people really have got a heart, let that young man who was elected the other day, let him go to Parliament. Let us sit down and find out where the problems are, all of us. Not one-sided, not propaganda one against the other. Find out why was the security forces behaving the way they did, why were some other people behaving the way they did, and we find a solution to this problem. If we don't, before the next election, because that was your question, it's going to reoccur again.
Okay, let me bring in Nick here. Nick, presidential petitions, by-election petitions. NRM has also said when they came from SEC on Friday, they are also rejecting the results. How tenable are these court options that we seem to be running to every by-election, every election? Or is this just political gymnastics?
First of all, the Honorable Captain Francis Babu offers a very rich lesson in history.
Yes.
While history is important for us to appreciate, I doubt if that history resonates to a young man born in 1986 who is now an adult. You know, and I think that 63 years after independence, many people will find it very difficult to place the blame in the, you know, in the aftermath of colonialism. I think we have a responsibility as a country to do better, and we should do better. In my view, I think just to address the three core things you began with on numbers, by-elections by nature have low voter turnout, simply because it's a down ballot. There's no top ballot. And so interest is very low, at least among the voters. The voting day is not a public holiday, unlike in the general election, where it's a public holiday. And so people have to choose between foregoing their work. They must love the person campaigning so much for them to turn up in large numbers to vote. So by-elections, by nature, throughout the last decade or so, have very low voter turnout. Now, this has been made worse by the way we conduct by-elections, because the entire party structure descends upon a small constituency. It's a case of too many cooks just spoiling the process. And you have the party presidents, you have the country's president descending upon that small constituency. You saw what happened in Arua. It's no different from what's happening in Kawempe, that you have then a very messy process. In the aftermath of it, you see what we have now seen. People who have been maimed, people who have been arrested, people who have been tortured, people who have been killed. If you follow any by-election, that is a characteristic of by-elections, that it just tends to be messy because too many people are involved. And then the voters tend to stay away because really, first, it is messy, it is violent, but secondly, there's no top ballot, and so it's just a down ballot, oftentimes for a very short time. In the case of my learned colleague, Nalu Kola, it's really just 8 months in Parliament. And so there isn't a lot of you know, enthusiasm in the process, and so you tend to have very low voter turnout. The second thing really for me is, in the case of Kawempe, what I saw really from what you now heard from the NRM party, the NRM party officials, the president of the country, it is quite clear to me that the NRM party was not in charge of their own process in that election. It appears to me that the PLU elements have taken over functionally and operationally the conduct of that election.
What makes you say that?
I can tell you, the person who is supposed to be the PLU boss is the army commander.
True.
Who do you think deployed the soldiers there? He wasn't the Electoral Commission, he wasn't the police, he was the army commander, who is in full charge of the army. Nobody can order the movement of such number of troops in this town except the army commander. And his affiliation with PLU gives, sorry? Sorry. His affiliation with the PLU gives me the belief that the PLU element, you know, the Balams and the Kawandas and that group, the Chawandas, really ran over the NRM party structures in the way that they then went about that election. And it is for two reasons. I think they have their eye on the next election, that having been abandoned by their party, by their leader who was supposed to be on the ballot, now he's the army commander, they've gone back to the party and they want to take over the structure of that party. You walk to the NRM Secretariat here at Chadondo, the biggest poster on the entrance of the NRM Secretariat is that of Mohozi, the army commander. So for me, I think that there's just a functional overrun of that political system and party by that external interest, in a way that now gives us what we see in Kawempe. The other reason is this, that you have people who have promised the NRM that we have Buganda. We are going to get Buganda back from NUP. And boy, have they made a killing from it. You know, all manners of people, from the person who claims to be a ghetto president in, what's his name, the disabled guy. You have Kusasira, Butcherman, Kusasira, and that group. They have promised the president, we have Buganda. And now the chance to deliver presented itself in Kawempe, and they were failing. How best do you then cover your tracks? It is to be able to make the process messy and blame other people. But all that said, your question was about the law. I don't think this is a legal problem. I don't even think the courts are going to be able to resolve it. I actually think it's unwise for the NRM to seek to go to court, because if they do so, their own mess in that election will be exposed. I don't think that a court process will solve this. This is a deeply political problem. And as Captain Francis Babu said, you need to have a dialogue. We must de-escalate, because we are getting into radicalized politics. On both ends of the divide. On the NRM side, there's just a certain fear in certain constituencies, especially where there's a NUP stronghold, that they descend so hard upon the people and use such violence. And in the opposition elements, there's a certain element of frustration. People don't see a possibility of change through elections. And they tend then to become rather unconventional in the way they approach politics. And so you have to de-escalate. You cannot de-escalate unless you show a commitment to a genuine, free and fair process. These coming elections might even be worse than the past elections, if we are to go by the trend. And I'll end by saying this, that you do not have accountability for past violations. I spent all my energy and life, and for it I went to jail, documenting the violations in the last election. Many people who are involved in killing people on the street. The president himself admitted that his security forces killed 54 people on November 18th and 19th of 2020. But I can tell the figures are much higher. But more concerning is that the people who are involved in those exercises have been promoted. They are heading security agencies. There's no accountability. If you don't raise the cost of human rights violation, if you don't raise the cost of the subversion of a political process, these kind of things will become a common feature of our election.
You say the structures of the NRM, and you almost sound like the structures of the NRM have been hijacked by PLU. What characterizes your thought process to be able to have this as a comment from you?
First, the NRM Secretary General and party officials don't know what happened. They themselves are saying we were cheated. They don't know what happened. It is inconceivable to think that it was NUP deploying JAT officials with guns. It's inconceivable to think that it was NUP deploying people to beat up journalists. So the party doesn't know what happened, saying, oh, we're going to go to court, we were cheated, we don't know what happened. Yet, when you look at the people who were deployed in that electoral process, a key element of the PLU were in charge of those processes and working with the security forces to mete out violence. They were really in charge. You look at people like Balam, really Balam, without PLU, what is Balam? A music producer and concert organizer. Balam was in charge of that mosque area where, you know, 2 members were packed within a polling station. That, for me, they decided within the party, the lack of coherence to explain what happened, and the prominent role of PLU leaders and the military gives me, I think, the conclusion that PLU really overran party structures in Kawempe North.
You have been doing the trends, before I get to Professor, 2016, 2011, 2021, and you have seen especially the escalation of the violence. First it was to the opposition. This one particularly, it was to the journalists. What happens to the change of tact in this? What causes the change of tact in this, in your reading?
So, and I spoke to some of those people who are beating up people because I know some of them. And I asked them, what is the problem? And they gave me a simple explanation. That as a soldier, I am deployed with orders to go and beat up people, right? If I beat up people and I'm identified, the system is willing to sacrifice me. So what do? First, I cover my face. I try as much as possible to disguise. You have a different name on your shirt. You see an Opoka who looks like, doesn't look like anything from the north. Because you want to protect yourself. The crime that journalists committed in that electoral process was to shine a light on that process and to photograph and to share information that this is what is happening, this is what they're doing. They were seeking to just switch off the lights and operate in darkness. Unfortunately for them, they targeted journalists, but now you don't have to beat a reporter because everybody has a phone and can take a picture. The crime that media houses committed is simply to shine a light on a process. And you have these people who are deployed, who are really vulnerable because they can easily be sacrificed. They're folders. And they do everything to try and disguise themselves, to try and break a camera of a reporter. That's exactly what happened.
Thank you very much. Professor, as an academic, but also as a social scientist, when you look at the trends of the population, and you look at our election processes and the by-election, even coming close to the most recent by-elections, 2023 had 4, 2024 had 1, this one has had Kawempe. What do you see as our projection or the trajectory of the population versus the governed and the governing?
Yes, thank you very much, Timothy. I think for me, I would like to start it from where Captain Francis Babu was going, or where he took us. I know we can't go back to the detail of history and tribe, but the import of what he said in his analysis is how the state relates with the people. There's an Indian professor, Chattopadhyay, who talks about, his book is called The Politics of the Governed, and the point he makes is that in the colonial system, there were citizens and there were natives and governed people. So for the citizens, the colonial state, of course the citizens were the white colonialist people and the families. So for the citizens, the colonial state created courts and other systems of mediation and churches and whatever you want to call it. For governed people, the state re-emphasized security apparatuses to deal with them because the state, particularly the colonial state, never imagined it would have a civic debate and discussion with governed people. And the import of what Captain Babu says is that then we carry that forward, which is very much the same analysis that Professor Pata Chatterjee says, is that post-independence, that kind of framework was never dismantled. So you have the security forces on one side, and they do not, they have to be acting in the interest of the state on one side, but are not obliged to answer to people. And you can just see this in the day-to-day as we interact. You're asking maybe a traffic cop on where to pass, or a gate man, whoever seems to have power doesn't seem to be obliged to explain to anybody anything. It is just communicating power. So it just happened to be that this was an election. But you know, you need to find out how different is this with the day-to-day interaction of those who have power and those who do not have it. Whenever people have power, they seem to treat others with those kinds of excesses. So one, the history matters in terms of state-citizen relationships. Wherever it is, whether it's in India or it's in Uganda or wherever it is very important. Then you come to the issue, looking at the force that played out in Kawempe. A question which comes to mind is what were the, because you asked, was it a do or die? And I don't think it was a do or die, but probably could people have submitted wrong intelligence to the state of how Kawempe will play out? And because of the intelligence they submitted, could they have made certain promises, okay? Because, for example, one of the things you have, which is a contestation between that Noop raises first, is the inflation of numbers. So we don't know whether the numbers were inflated or they were not inflated, but there's a claim that there's 21% increase from the usual number of voters. Maybe the population that graduated into voting just increased, but there's also an allegation that the numbers were inflated. So if these happen to have been the issues, what else could have been the issues? And mainly for me, what was security told about Kawempe by those who are supposed to gather evidence around Kawempe? Could they have made wrong promises and therefore on that day, and maybe have been facilitated to deliver on those promises, which then makes them have to deliver? And while that may not be very common here, but at least you have seen it with the way the state apparatuses work in the US with regard to arresting. They do have targets of how many criminals they must arrest, the US police departments. And if they do not find them, at least they pick black men. That's the whole reason black men end up in those kinds of systems. Because everyone will believe they are bad, everyone will believe they are drug pushing, so if you arrest them, there is a target. But the police have to meet targets, okay, in the US to fulfill that. So it made me reflect, well, around Kawempe and what we saw around Kawempe, and I'm agreeing with everything, what everything else other people have said, maybe the apathy around the issue being, I mean, a by-election and the rest, but also could there have been promises made? And could there have been facilitations around these promises, which then drove people to want to deliver on whatever they could have, whatever intelligence they would have submitted? Now, we are not consumers of intelligence, so we can only speculate. Then, of course, the other thing was the issues. I imagine if this happened in a very, very rural area, maybe there wouldn't have been a problem. But every election has issues that drive that kind of election. And of course, urban areas always have issues around unemployed youth. And of course, you have the state is always promising that it is with us where your interests will be best served. The opposition also creates a narrative of, you see, they have ignored you for a long time. And of course, people in the urban areas are not very much as desperate as rural areas. So they are ready to give you a run for your money. So you do have that. But for me, in it all, I see opportunities for improvement come 2026. Of course, now you're seeing there will be, of course, a lot of surveillance. But for me, anyway, the other thing I want to say is we should not just focus on the election as election per se. We should ask ourselves, how do we behave as a people under normal circumstances? Other than Kawempe, people's land keeps being grabbed in this country. Who reports about it? Or what happens if you report about it, okay? So you do have that, these levels of violence, and some of them are not even state-inspired. Sometimes we as individuals, you go hire a few soldiers to help you throw off people for you. So there's always this acting out of violence, whether it is an election process or it's not an election process. Where it captures attention now that we are discussing elections is because everyone zones in on there. The media is there, even we are looking, it is making news. But violations of security apparatuses around this country occurs all the time, okay? It is only that if it's rural peasantry being thrown off the land, it's not even worth reporting, so the media does not even appear there. But the brutalization there could actually be worse. And it is worse sometimes even undercover that even the state may not pick it, or may pick it very late if someone is very courageous or there's a commission of inquiry. But these violations are occurring on a daily. So people who have been committing those violations on a daily will not be saints in an electoral by-election. Okay. So an electoral by-election or an electoral process simply gives us an opportunity to see the extent of how much those violations have occurred. But it goes back to what Captain Babu said. How do those who have power treat those who do not have power? And we have to go back to look at the state-citizen relationships. And by state, we just don't mean those who are at the top of the leadership, but anyone who has access to state power. If I'm an LC5 chairman in a village, how do I use that power against the landless people or the peasant whose land I want to grab? If I'm a police officer managing a police post, how do I use that power to deal with those who I think I can extort from? If I'm a security person guarding a gate, how do I use that power to interact with clients coming, let's say, to a hospital or whatever? So we have to see it in a broader perspective of powerful, powerless dynamic. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Let me read some feedback that has come through. Thank you, Timothy, for the show and the good work. This is Owori from Tororo, Moses. Our fellow Ugandans take politics so personal to the extent that they cannot accept the results and want to argue a lot. That's why we're being injured. Okay? Interesting submission there. Another one comes in and says, good evening, Timothy. Thank you for the show. What we witnessed in Kawempe by-election was a feasible study of what we are prepared for in 2026. It was like a mock exam before you do your final UNEB exam. Next year, we expect JAT, GAT, CAT, LAT, MAT. You're finishing all the alphabets. Interesting there. Timothy, thank you for the show. We expect more military activity in the forthcoming elections. Kawempe North was a show of what the system was able to do, and it was an awakening for Ugandans. This is Teacher Simwe in Bara. Okay? Timothy, thank you for the show. I am Richard from Soroti. My question goes to the representative, Honorable Kakoza. How can the government and the Electoral Commission ensure accountability for electoral malpractices, atrocities committed by security in broad daylight, beating of individuals, especially what we have seen in the by-elections in this country? Finally, before we take a break, good evening, Timothy. I see there are some government officials, especially in security, who want to overthrow the government by mistreating the people. The intention of security is never wanted by the people. NRM showed it in Kawempe. I am Grace from Kakumiro. Okay, keep the messages coming. Let's take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll be talking on the other side of solutions, but also take a sneak peek into the letter of the president that he wrote to the public. This and more after this break.
Street issues are my target. We are what? Unstoppable. We are what? Unstoppable. I'm in a plantation, but on a global mission. Internet ambition, full condition. We are what? Unstoppable. We are what? Unstoppable. Oro cash is gone. Netaga yo karoni. Nigga mukafoni. Money in the zone. We are what? Unstoppable. We are what? Unstoppable. We are good.
With you and MTN together, our ambition is unstoppable.
We are what? Unstoppable!
The government's core mandate is to maintain law and order, safeguard citizens' rights, and provide essential public services.
Remember, one of the pillars of a roadmap is innovation and entrepreneurship.
There has been this question of how are you protecting our indigenous seed?
It's going to be a tall project that answers somebody's question.
For the past 20 weeks, the front bench has brought you insightful discussions on governance, security, healthcare, justice, and commerce.
Why do you go through this complicated procedure, involve the lawyers? You bring the case against him, the judge will hear you out and pass judgment, and you're out of court in record time.
We remain committed to keeping you informed and engaged on key national matters.
So these are huge. These are powerful organizations which now Uganda chairs. Why don't you come together?
If we haven't migrated to the e-card because of various reasons, including that not all the people of Uganda have smartphones.
You can sit in your house, apply for a passport. If you have a Ugandan who has a successful logistics firm in the US, it means he can come to Uganda and do a lot more.
Now airing every Monday at 8:30 p.m. with me, Jethro Kasaiji, your interface with the government only on your public broadcaster, UBC, Inspiring Uganda.
In a nation hungry for truth, a world where every story matters, there exists a beacon of trust and reliability. For decades, they've been our voice and our window to the world, holding the mirror of our history. With 4 TV stations and 11 radio channels spanning 27 languages, they stand as guardians of information, defenders of truth. With Maskari Heritage Advantage, They uphold every citizen's right to reliable and free information. Their archived stories shaped our past and illuminate our present. Yet now, as new challenges arise and the world evolves, their mission faces its greatest test yet. Be part of our journey and let's navigate the unknown, uncover the untold, and safeguard our future together. Tune into your public broadcaster, for it is the intersection of trust and truth. Because to UBC, your story, every story, and every voice matters. UBC, inspiring Uganda.
Uganda fire! Endima fire! Our border fire! Mtn fire! Nangone fire! Fire, fire! Chileka banda fire! Friends fire! Banana massacre fire! Our taxi fire! Fire, fire!
Uganda fire! Buy your tickets through MTN Momo on *165 *20# and come support Uganda Cranes.
Together our passion and smart is unstoppable. We are what? Unstoppable.
Welcome back from that quick commercial break here on Behind the Headlines. My name is Timothy Nyangweso. In the studio, I'm joined by Professor Sarah Sali, Counsel Nicholas Opio, the Deputy Spokesperson of the NUP, Waiswa Alex Mufumbiro. I'm joined by Honorable Captain Francis Babu and the Honorable John Kakoza. And we're James Kakoza. And we're discussing everything, the trends, and what the future looks like come Agenda 2026 of this country. We're piggy-banking it right from the by-elections, but also the general elections of 2026 and 2021. Be part of the conversation, 0709 60 25 92, but also we're streaming on X, #UBC there, and a lot of messages coming through. We'll get to those in a short while. Let me come to Professor. Professor, especially when this Kawempe by-election happened, when the last time we had Honorable Akena here and Honorable Richard Todong, a lot of concern, and I could say fear, within the public. How do we de-escalate the allegations of staffing, intimidation, and also violence in the next election?
Wow. I wish I knew, but we can try to have a discussion around that. First of all, I think there's someone who submitted here about the difference between a by-election and a and a regular election. And I think also Honorable Kakoza talked about it when we are spread out all over the country. So actually the normal elections tend to be very peaceful until much later, okay? The by-elections, because we are all there and we have all concentrated and there's a problem. So, I mean, people saw the pictures of Kawempe and they were scared. But as I say, it's not very different from what normally happens in this country when certain events do occur. So I don't think people are scared, really terribly scared, because it's not very, very unusual that that kind of event happens. But the mere fact that it has happened is not necessarily desirable. I imagine both the state and the opposition are going to, everyone is saying it was a bad thing, so everyone's going to try to do something about it. Of course, I know if any of the officers who committed acts of violence are discovered, normally they tend to be dealt with and held to account. And but of course, as Council Nicholas said, many were masked, so I hope they can be discovered. But whatever the case, I think what it does, the mere fact that we're having this discussion and shining the torch into it, people will act differently. In the past, people would not have to be masked to go in those kinds of operations. Now that they have to mask, is because they're aware of consequences and they're scared. So each of these crises provide us with an opportunity to do better and to improve. Like I've never forgotten, I think before Honorable Norbert Mao ran for an election in Gulu, we never used to have declaration of voters registers and everything. It's when he contested the voter numbers that came out of the military barracks. I think it was 1996. Yeah, that's when we started declaration. You have to declare, there must be a nominal roll, we must know how many people were there, and then you compare. So each time we have had an election, whether national or by-election, there have been issues raised, and these issues have paved way for reforms. And it is just unfortunate that we don't recognize this. But the reforms are incremental, but they are there. Now we take it as if it is part of our DNA that we declare voters registers. It wasn't the case until this came up. The whole issue of there being lines, checking things of corruption and all those kinds of voter bribery and all these rules that are being put in each time. And you see they occur by either civic engagement, they occur by the media portraying them, but also they have occurred each time we've had an election which has been contested in court. Rulings are made. And those rulings have paved way for the EC to put in place new measures. So for me, I see it as an opportunity to self-cleanse, to reflect, and to come up with better. So I don't think for me that it's doom and gloom going ahead. But it is an opportunity for us to say this will not occur again, and also to ensure that it does not occur again. And I know those who will be put in operations, now that almost everyone has a smartphone. I know the journalists were chased away, but still these pictures came up. So where were the people recording from? So the mere fact that you know that you're going to be recorded means you're going to act differently. But basically it goes back, as I said, to how we display power, how we behave when we have power, and how we should engage. And like I was saying before we went for break, you know, I know this will look far-fetched, but similar. When each of us attains power and have the opportunity to have lead cars, you know, like you and me now will complain about the traffic and how bad the traffic is. But when we have an opportunity to be in a position with the lead cars, we shall enjoy that position. Instead of saying, okay, now I've been made a minister, let me use that position to improve the traffic. No one wants to improve below because they are enjoying the perks of power. But for me, the issue is let this be an opportunity to reflect, and I believe it's going to be an opportunity to reflect, but also an opportunity to make new improvements. And that's why I don't think there's anything wrong about going to court. Of course, it is obvious that the margin was so big, but even in a court process, because I think was it yesterday or today, even FDC is contesting the findings. Yes. So it's not just NUP and NRM.
Even FDC wants to sue the Electoral Commission.
Yes, so everyone's going to go to court. And for me, the beauty of this is that we are going... So for me, the issue is that this is going... For me, this is going to be an opportunity for everyone to lay it bare in the court processes, and the judges who are going to adjudicate these cases are going to tell us where we went wrong, and the rulings are going to form a basis for further improvement of electoral processes.
Already Waiswa said the rulings were already in contempt, but let me come back to the two questions I want to leave with you before I get to Nicholas. One is, how do we, there was a season where you talked about land, those underlying issues that really we cover there. How do we get to issue-based politics or elections in this country? But also, if the U-Boat statistics are anything to go by, there's a big population of young people.
Programs.
What does the trend look like come 2026 as a social scientist?
Thank you, Timothy. I think our elections has always been issue-based. I think people should not say we have never had issues. Whether issues are around tribe or around religion or around employment, our elections have always been issue-based. And actually, we have been tracking these elections from 2021. And not 2021, 2016, at least that's when I started the documentation. Actually, from that, the researches we do, these elections have been issue-based. They are moving away from the tribe and religion, the traditional, to other aspects of identity politics. Unemployment, being ghetto youth, so the issues of the rich vis-a-vis the poor, the issues of economic empowerment, the issues of which leadership works for you, the issues of land, So they are always issue-based.
But it sounds politicized, Professor, because...
No, an election is about politics, Timo says. So it has to be political construction of issues. So how do you get an issue, which is a regular issue, and then politicize it and weaponize it for you to appeal? An electoral process is a contestation. It is me, and my vehicle of a party being better than yours. So it's not about an objective process. It is a contestation.
So it's a very subjective process.
Politics is like that all over the world. So it's about you marketing yourself and demarketing the opponent.
So we can't change it.
That is what politics is. So stop thinking that there's going to be a political process where it is neutral and you're talking issues without biases. That's the nature of politics. So then the issue you come to, and I know whichever part of the world you go to. Now, then the issue you come to is what party is articulating the best issues and is making more reasonable promises that I can trust. Of course, in the developed world, the issues are not around the kind of issues we look at. The issues about social security, the issues around employment, the issues are taxation. Are we going to have more taxation? Are we going to remove taxation? Are we deploying in Iraq? Are we withdrawing from Iraq and Afghanistan? Those are the issues they deal with. Each context has its issues. Our issues here will be around land, and how the Timothys are the ones taking our land. That is an issue of framing. It will be around employment. We are unemployed because the Council Nicholas are living large in Kololo. That's the reason why I don't have what to eat in Katanga. So the issue of framing takes the discourse and the context of the day. But politics is around issues. Which issues does your party stand for vis-a-vis which issues does my party stand for? And in selling our manifestos to the people. How do we do it? I will frame yours as being more lousy than mine, and I will frame myself as being better. So stop thinking that the issues of politics in Africa is in any way more inferior than any other people. Just because you've seen others on podiums and standing and debating, it is the same elsewhere, but the context will shape the issues that rise up. It will also shape the framing of those issues. That's just the nature of politics.
Thank you. Council.
And maybe just the one last thing I wanted to say. When you see issues like tribe, the vehicles, these issues arriving quoted in either tribe or religion or the youth now, which is the big buzzword. I mean, that is just identity politics around an issue. So that I see that if there are very many younger people, I have to market myself as around the youth, and therefore I have the best interests of the youth. Or if you go to my tribal area, you had better articulate the issues as concerns that tribe. Otherwise, you will not come out of it, which goes back to the political demarcations, the colonial demarcations, that if you are in Muganda, you have to dress things in Uganda. If you're Mugisu, you dress things like that. And that's why Captain Francis Babu said we need to go out of that. But ideally, those are the vehicles. Elsewhere, they will be called Democrats, they will be called Republicans, they will be called Hispanics, and then the African Americans, and things like that. It also goes into identity, or Muslims and non-Muslims. So it is all identity politics. So how do you then create an issue, identify it with a group, and then create politics of identity, and make one group feel it is more disadvantaged than another? Just how politics is played.
Nicholas, you seem like you're itching to make a comment on this, but as you're going to make your comment on it, please add a comment to the President's letter, because I'd like to pick out a few lines, but something along the lines of our politics come to issues, but also your comment on the President's letter, rejecting the results, but also giving us a lesson in history, and 2009, 2016, all those were embedded in his letter.
So you can intellectualize electoral politics and what Prof has said, framing it, right? And if you think about it that way, then she's right. Yeah, these are issue-based elections. But I like to look at them in two ways. One is from the perspective of a voter. My grandmother, who is walking from Pawela Lem Primary School to go and vote, is she voting on any particular issue?
Yeah.
At least for the presidency.
The bridge.
Okay.
The road.
Is she voting for, what are the, how does she conceptualize what Prof calls issues? And I guess when you go down to that voter perspective, you're going to have multiple interests, and that's spaces where tribal politics plays, identity politics has as she's framed it. But you also have questions of inequality. I think in Kawempe you saw that Kawempe is one of the poorest divisions in this country. When it rains, it's one of the first places to get flooded.
And that's the issue.
Yeah, that's the issue for them.
Yes.
Yeah, that's the issue. So to a voter, they're localized. I mean, if you go to my part of the world now, you have this campaign about the Balalo must go. So in those, that's the issue. But I think conceived at like a macro level, a macro level, you'd think that.
Let's go back to your grandmother.
Yeah.
Because you say voter, her pain points are an enabling environment, how she can be able to get her produce somewhere else. Let's look at that voter. Let's look at the young person who is looking for employment.
No, to the contrary, that's not what really preoccupies many of them, at least in my part of the world. It is who is the candidate who attends my funerals.
And that's the issue.
That's the issue.
Yeah.
No,
that's a side show.
That is an issue.
That shouldn't be an issue.
Yes.
The issue must be something bigger than
Yes.
that, than who gives me salt, who has bribed me, who is my relative, and stuff like that. So I think that the common voter goes to a voting booth. I don't think governance around a particular single issue for one of them. Each one of them has. I doubt that we vote for the president on the basis of manifestos, because if we did, Mohamed Chibirike would be president of this country. At some point, he had one of the best manifestos for this country. So we don't, I think, at the macro level, vote, based on a party platform, but several small little things that define us, including religion, tribe, inequalities, and stuff like that. But on the president's letter, and I think the Monitor did a story that traces, he's really been a whiner about elections. His entire political career has been about whining about elections. It is what took him to the bush. He has been complaining of being cheated in every election. So I'm not surprised that he's gone back to revisit some of his complaints about elections. But ultimately, really the question is, are you in charge or you're not in charge? Because clearly, to admit that there have been voter irregularity against your party is to say that my twin brother Waswa here has outsmarted you and he has all the resources and facilities, then you're not in charge of the process. If you have an electoral commission that you trust and believe in, you really wouldn't be doing, because that undermines that same electoral commission, that you're saying they're incapable of conducting a free and fair election. And so I think that President Museveni may want to think about abandoning his old whining ways of complaining about elections being rigged. I know that his entire career is built on that sort of complaint about unfair processes, but he's now the president of the country. He needs to be in charge. And you can only be in charge if you have a fair process, if you have an electoral commission you can trust. I think that this commission does not enjoy the confidence of many people. Many people think it's incompetent, because clearly they were standing by and looking on as Kawempe happened. And they seem powerless. They seem incompetent to even stop the process. I think that you've got to think about a more competent, a more transparent electoral commission than what we have.
Just one more question before I get to Waiswa there. The president, in his letter, talks about electoral and criminal investigations. But then he catches me with biometric verification. This is why we are insisting on only biometric verification. Biometrically verified will vote. And then he goes on to talk about who organized the Kabaka's riots in 2009, 10th and 12th there, the 2020 riots there. Why? And then he talks about the pangas in Masaka and gets wrong statistics on the number of polls. Are we going to see an electoral reform pushing us all to a biometric verification? One, but also two, why give us a lesson on things that are still scars, the Kabaka and the riots, but also the Masaka pangas? Why bring these contexts now?
He's reminding you what he did in those elections, on those episodes. He's reminding you. And he's saying I can go back to that. Because in 2009, you know what happened after Kayunga. This country, this town was in complete chaos for a whole week. So many people were killed. So many disappeared. In the last election, the same thing. So by evoking those episodes, it's telling you what it's capable of doing. That this is what I did in the past. It's really coded language, in my view, intended to send a message that, one, I think first that those episodes were bad, but that think about what I did in those elections. And I think that the president, his obsession with biometrics is not going to work because, let me give you a quick history. In 2001 election, we passed a law that required that every voter who came to the booth must have a photograph on the register to be able to vote, right? We took down the Electoral Commission register and we found out that over 68% of people didn't have photographs, and we went to court. The NRM lawyer who was in court arguing for the NRM argued that there was no need for photographs because local people can identify voters better. That process of just pictures alone has never been a requirement throughout elections. When it comes to election, people have no photos, go and vote. Nobody will care. I don't think that we have the structure, the technology to be able to have biometrics to work throughout this country. What would biometrics do in my village where there's no power? How would it work where there's no internet? So I think that while the idea of biometrics is good, the infrastructure required to be able to run that process is not built. And so we can't really have it. And cannot be the only measure for persons to exercise their franchise. If you do that, you're going to risk losing. Because their own elections in the NRM is still by means of lining up. The primaries of the NRM is by lining up, okay? And then you go from that to biometrics. I think that it is being, while it is a good idea, you can't achieve it.
Interesting. Waiswa, when you look in the lenses of 2026, you have experienced all the way from Kayunga to where we are today. What fate do you see this country?
Even Chisoro.
Or Hoima.
Chisoro, Hoima, Oyam, Omor.
He forgets in Chisoro that there are members of parliament who are on the run. So the chaos is everywhere. And the common denominator is NRM. Because that is where he wanted me to go.
The National Unity Platform, come 2026, what do you see as the fate of the general elections?
First of all, general elections are a constitutional process. It is not a favor from anybody that we have them. Sometimes people shade the picture that we are being helped to have an election. Every 5 years by law, we are supposed to have elections. And that does not...
Do we have elections?
I beg your pardon?
Do we have elections?
Now, I will say that I think for the last decade we have had military operations. And General Museveni clearly in his missive, he states and brags about the brutality that has been put to the Ugandans. For example, if you talk about, if he comes out and reminds Ugandans about his deployment of commandos from Somalia led by the late Lokech, it speaks volumes of somebody who came by spilling blood and is still happy to maintain office by spilling more blood, by having people murdered on the streets in cold blood. I can tell you that on the 54, there was a food vendor. On the 54, there was a child. On the 54, there was a woman in a taxi. Actually, the former spokesperson of police confirmed to the nation that 48 persons of the 54 admitted by government, although the numbers as council or PO has said, the numbers went up to hundreds. But on this 54, it is on government record that 48 of the 54 were innocent people. Now, if any security apparatus goes for a mission and even at war zone and comes back with a report card of having murdered 48 out of 54, that is about 90%. in an operation, then that must be questioned. And today in a by-election, a replica of what has been happening is brought back. We don't forget what happened in Arua. In Arua, people died. And still there was that braggativity of people dying because they came by spilling blood. So the fate of 2026 is in the hands of Ugandans to dethrone and dismantle the bandits who took over this country, because they have still maintained their style of coming as their style of being around for longer years. You know that even by the writing of General Museveni, we are affected by the laws of diminishing marginal utility after his overstay in power. That elongation of being in power beyond usefulness now has created those who think that they can be in the sideshow and take over government without endorsement by the people. There are people who now think that they have acclaimed the status of being heirs to a throne in Uganda, and therefore they are brute about it. They care less about the livelihood of the first citizens of this country, and they will do everything humanly possible, notwithstanding 2026. But the good news is here. This was a trial for Ugandans, and this is a democratic process. Because as National Unity Platform, I will tell you a story. When we were working on our constitution, I think Opio knows this, we had long discussions about the input of NUP, either being non-violent, inscribed in our law that we are non-violent, or not, deciding to leave it out and say, if it ever needs to be violent, let's be violent. The entire party, the delegates, decided that we should be non-violent, because as students of history, you cannot achieve the same thing by doing the same process. Now, we who are fighting against violence are being meted with state violence, and this is death. And the letter speaks it out loud, that they have invited us, and he further says that even telling Ugandans who come out and say that those have the reason as to why the NRM is here, that will also be criminal. So you look at a country where those in charge are living phobic of the reality from the masses, and therefore they will pound more. First of all, they will annihilate people from participating in elections, disenfranchise them, they will bribe them, there will be a lot of money used, the country will definitely go into inflation, there will be more abductions, more arrests. We have been talking about, of course, divide and rule. There has also been a categorical, like in the Kawempe by-election, we have discovered that there is a categorical system against the Muslims by the state. All the young people who were arrested and were Muslims and they were in their religious attires were treated inhumanly, as I can attest. Now, if you are charged towards an election in 2026, and you don't know who is in charge, of course the Electoral Commission is a toothless barking dog. It will never bite. They will never even know what is going on. At a polling station in Kawempe, Commissioner Dr. Simba, by his education, if you went to school, you respect anybody. Like when I was coming on this panel, when I looked at the people I was going to discuss with, there was a professor, there was a senior, there is a captain, there is that respect you will give to people who have taken time to go to school. Dr. Simba, a commission of the Electoral Commission, was stopped by, I don't want to say by an illiterate, it will sound funny, but by somebody who is second to even being close to him, an RDC, a deputy RDC of Masaka, Kambugu, deployed to rig elections. He told Dr. Simba, in our face, I will arrest you. The organizer of the election is now being told by an imported RDC from Masaka that he will arrest him. He created a lot of mayhem there, picked up our agents, the RDC, Kambugu. They beat them up.
Now, you paint a very gloom picture for 2026. Where is the silver lining?
The silver lining is that Ugandans are going to rise up, dethrone and dismantle the governance of the bandits.
At what cost of the country? You're talking about inflation, all these things. At what cost?
We are still struggling so much to make sure that it is a cost that does not take life. But,
and the country.
But, I beg your pardon?
A cost that doesn't take lives and the country.
Of course, if Ugandans are killed, then the country is not existent. We are existent because we have people in the country. So we are struggling so much because we know that the people that we are contesting against are going to unleash to us a military operation. As you have heard, the people who did whatever they did in 2021 were elevated. They were simply put aside for a few months, taken for other refresher courses, given more money, and now they are in charge. Mwesugwa is now in charge of operations. Then he was not. Among others, you will see many of them.
Okay.
So the picture that I want the hope in whatever happens that Ugandans must understand is the protest vote of 2026. I want to tell Ugandans that elections are a constitutional mandate. They are not a party, they are not a favor from anybody. You must participate in them, whether they make the field ugly, whether it is muddy, whether it is swampy. It is your constitutional obligation to participate in that election if we don't want our country to descend into violence. Because honestly speaking, we are just the leaders. There are very many people, if we don't manage our country very well, who can take other means. For us, we are simply talking about constitutional means because that is what we know. It is what we have been taught to understand, and it is what we want to practice. So the picture is Ugandans rallying Ugandans to involve themselves in the protest vote of 2026.
Thank you. Captain Francis Babu, you are not the spokesperson of the EC, neither are you part of the EC, but why is the silence so loud from the Electoral Commission?
Please allow me to say one or two other things before I go. The Electoral Commission is a very simple thing. That one is so simple. You don't have too much we can answer that very quickly.
But they are the umpires, Captain.
Yes, I'm requesting that I will answer that one. It's a very, very simple thing. The educated and the elite of this country are disconnected from the people in this country. They talk too much English and they are brainwashed.
And they don't believe the poor have
They don't believe the rest of the country is there. They are here trying to talk each other out of everything. And it's not one-sided, it's everywhere. So, the educated or the elite are disconnected from the people. There are so many things we can talk about. For example, you are talking about holding an election, a by-election, which is about a year to go. Where do we get, first of all, we're a poor country. And Kampala has got enough MPs who can talk right now. Why do you have to hold an election after 50% of the term is gone? In the case of the president, yes, and the president, in other countries, the vice president finishes the term. Now, why aren't we reviewing this constitution? Then you come here and say, no, you can't hold elections on Sunday, on Friday, on Saturday because of religion. I thought religion would help us to balance this country by praying for it, so we can hold elections on Sunday. We people in Kampala, we go to look for food on Thursdays. So when you go there and you're tinkling around with that machine they have brought, and we're in line and we can see you're not holding elections, we go to the market to work. So we don't vote. Others say, look, I have to go and get working. So we need an election, and we ask the religious groups, so please pray for us so we can also hold elections on Sunday while you're praying for us. You can have an election, then go to church, go to the mosque, wherever it is. Please. This Thursday business does not work. And then you have a public holiday. On the main election, on these by-elections, you don't have public holidays. So that's another problem we are having. The other point, civic education. We put it in the Constitution, for goodness sake. I see people giving civic education on PDM and what is the other one? PDM and the sister is called Emyoga.
Operational.
During that time, if they could add in civic education for politics, for elections, not only election, but talking about generally what people should do to balance this country. No, it is there actually. Civic education is in the Constitution. So now, the parties all parties have got problems within themselves. And as they go on, you will see each one will have its own problems. In Kenya, they have done it very well. They divide and they divide and they coalesce again together. They divide, they coalesce. I mean, it's not only Uganda, it's most of African countries. We have failed to run parties. Somebody becomes in a party and he becomes a mini god. So the other people fight him. And this business of having demigods in a country is very dangerous. One of the reasons why we didn't want kings is because we said the kings were way above us. Why should our leaders now be way above us? That's another thing Ugandans should look out for. Now, when we go to our people, we go to persuade them. It's a persuasion. It is not war. No. You do not lie to them. Now let me tell you where persuasion comes in. You don't go to Kawempe with the people from Masaka, Chibuga, I don't know, to come and campaign. What do they know about Kawempe? Even me who is staying in Kampala, outside Kawempe, I don't know what is in Kawempe. It is the Kawempe people who should campaign for themselves. Now, this is what they did. People were bringing people from outside. You find the people sitting there and talk. What do you know about Kawempe? When I was when we were starting the system, I taught in a lot of these places, so I knew them. For example, a few minutes ago, you were talking about when it rains and you have problems and whatnot. It's mainly in Kawempe South. But said and done, Kawempe North is a very nice place. They've got industries. It's quite a big place. We need to know what those industries do. So you need a good leader who's got a merit to be a leader and have a meritocracy. We need to get our people to understand what does a member of parliament do? That should be part of our civic education. Who is a member of parliament? What do they do? So that when somebody is voting, he knows that I've seen these people. One of these, this gentleman or this lady, is the one who can be a good member of parliament. That comes out of civic education. And then the parties are supposed to help us. They are supposed to present their man or woman who is their best. Now, then they bring us very interesting characters. They even go and buy them qualifications on this street. What do they call this street?
Nasa Road.
Yes,
Nasa Road.
Where they sell, and people actually support them. And somebody goes to go to parliament, cannot even say, so help me God, says, help me Congo. I mean, how do we...
Yes, very true.
Help me Congo.
I mean, really, we are being made fools of. Our leaders, and then, because I am a leader, I don't like a leader who's better than me. But when we were in school, there used to be a person who was number one and who was last. Why do you hate number one? A good leader is the one who makes other leaders. A good leader is the one who makes what? Other leaders. And then the other leader makes other leaders. So if you have leaders who don't want leaders who are sharp, then time has come for those to leave the stage. This is another problem we are having. We pretend our behavior. I am sorry, we need now psychologists, because our behavior is atrocious. We behave very badly. We don't respect each other. And you know, Socrates said democracy will fail, because the poor will want the riches of the rich, and democracy will give it to them. The young would like to be elders. Democracy will give it to them. Women would like to be men. Democracy will give it to them. Fraudsters who will want positions of government, democracy will give it to them. And when they get in power, they will be worse dictators than anybody else. So this is said by Socrates many years before. Now, I want to end by saying, look, I do not agree that this should be the status quo in 2026. This president of this country can change this even overnight. He has the power. He can get people to change this and make it better for everybody. And it has been done before. The first man in the Electoral Commission, you were asking me a few minutes ago, did a fantastic job. His name was Akabwai.
Stephen Kawanda.
The election he held were excellent. Stephen who?
Kawanda.
He's a Ugandan. He did not come from Mars. We have Ugandan who as good as Stephen Akabwai. When you people talk about independent electoral commission, I laugh. The other day we had one not very far from this country, our neighbor. They did something called Independent and Boundaries Electoral Commission, and they had a big stage where everybody came and talked. Professors were talking, these were talking, lawyers were talking, and we had a fantastic time for 1 month. It became an Independent and Boundaries Commission. When the elections were over, people wanted to kill them. They said all sorts against the independent group, which was not appointed the way it had been appointed before. So it is not how you appoint it. It is the quality of leadership bringing other good leaders. It is not, all these things you people say, the independence of those depends on quality of the leaders that appoint those leaders.
Thank you.
Let's go on now, because it's very, very important. Last
appointing authority.
In 2026, we can make it better.
We have an opportunity.
I don't give up. I'll never say it will continue this way. We can change, and starting with our president. This precursor we've had now, what are the problems? Can we get rid of them? Yes. Can we explain each other? Yes. Lastly, if you are unhappy in an election, our constitution is very clear, you go to court. So if he feels he's unhappy, fine, let him go to court. But let him give us facts, and the court will decide. Then I want us to go to one word only. Remember, I've been talking about Lee Kuan Yew, and the word of the MPH, meritocracy, pragmatism, and honesty. The last word, honesty. We need Ugandan leaders who are honest. This is our country. These are our children. These are our brothers. And we should stop being brainwashed, because here, you know, people talk about credentialism. It's a big thing, credentialism. Then I asked them, before the Mzungu came here, how did we live? So credentialism. Now, credentialism came, fine, but don't misuse it. Some people are good leaders as technocrats. Some people are good leaders as professors. Some people are good leaders in different places. Others are good leaders in leading the whole nation. Now, what we need to do is to get leaders to lead us who can make other leaders. These leaders you people are telling us, some of us are not very happy about them. We are tired of drama. And if they want to do, what is this thing? This man who slapped his friend in the Oscars because he had said his wife did not have hair.
Will Smith.
Yeah, but that kind of drama, which they do, hysterical drama. We are tired of hystericals. We are tired of propaganda. We are tired of hating each other. We should like each other.
Okay. Let me bring in Honorable James Kakoza. Honorable, you are at the tip of this spear as the national resistance movement. How do we clean it before we get to 2026, before it tips over?
No, it's simple. And it's good that all of us,
clean it?
All Ugandans have been here. But I want to put it clear on record that the torture in politics, the behavior of security is not a solution. People must be serious about what they want to do and what you need to know to put the country forward. Actually, since we are in a multi-party setting, there must be a benchmark, a minimum, that really, if you are looking at a lead of a party and somebody starts politics of identity, I think it's outdated. For me, I got a chance and participated when Bush was campaigning in 2003. They called me. I'm a member of the World Trade Council. I was South Bend. When all those Democrats and Republicans they are talking about issues, not personalities, not tribes, not where you come. And they will never vote for you. If you come on a podium, start talking about so and so, they say, that one is nothing. So I do appeal to people who think can be leaders of today and tomorrow, to give a very good example, leave politics of identity. It does not help at all. It does not develop a country. The history is clear. All these parties, for a long time ago, they started on the regional basis, on tribal basis, but is it working now? Is it working? It can't. It can't work. By the way, the people we are talking about, the voters of ours, are very, very clever than leaders. I'm telling you, the moment you start on a podium talking about non-issues which does not concern them, they will say that one is nothing, and they will never vote for you. And I don't want to believe that what happened in Kawempe, in by-elections, in national elections is totally different. When MPs are running to look for votes, parties are running to win an election to get 51%, it becomes totally different. There is no concentration like in a by-election. So for me, we need, as people coming to be readers, we need to set examples so that we don't go back in history. Okay. For me, I don't agree. Politics of violence, politics of disrespecting, persuade someone and tell him, please, this is a party, has got a program for you, this is our manifesto, but this business of saying, so and so is like this, so and so, that's not really. If you compare notes about the leaders we had with the hostility, 81 up to 85, people were there, but we are talking issues. They were talking about issues. But today, when you look at the leaders of today, they are looking for survivors. Actually, some of us who think that things must change, the parties themselves must try hard to have internal democracy, where you can say, we have the party constitution, we have delegate conference, we have structures down, not this business of coming today, I can decide to go on this. That's what makes a problem. And when we are making this Political Organizations Act, we said, okay, each party must have a constitution, must have internal democracy. When you start with yourselves, you give a best example that a party which is going to capture power have credible people to be. Because what you are doing in your parties, when you go out, you get power. When you are saying you are demonizing the party in government, but you are doing is contrary.
Okay.
So I think things can happen. If you say the elections, Akabwai started in 1996. 2001 up to 2005, the violence was really terrible. 2006 up to 2011, it was totally different. The reforms, like the professor said, we've been every term of election, the reforms have been there. The reforms have been there. Because remember, we used even to vote without knowing how many voters at the polling station. But right now, currently, we have a digital world. Any member is contesting in a constituency, you have to go to a polling station when you know the number, you know the people who are going to vote, and those reforms can be possible to make the improvement of these systems work better.
Thank you. Let me read some feedback so that I can give parting shots to the guests here. Good evening, Timothy. We should be taking lessons as Ugandans. Which lessons are to respect the law that are set for elections, okay? James here sends a message quite lengthy, and yes, now listen to your rich and weeping and wailing because the misery that is coming upon you. Your wealth has rotted, your moth has been eaten by clouds, your gold and silver has corroded, corrosion testifies. I think this is a scripture. And it continues to say, you condemned and have murdered innocent people and were not opposing it. Timothy, help me read this verse to the NRM leaders. Interesting. Another lengthy one that comes in here, it is from Moroto or Yag. He says, Timothy, the panelists, glad to reach out to you, senior panelists there. We must learn from Kawempe's by-election. Politicians and security people do not care the people they serve. They favor the financial stipends that they get. The politicians only dream to get his or her elective office, enjoy all benefits, and security officers use their platforms for deployment and getting promotions by beating and violating human rights, okay? Good evening, Timothy. Everything that happened in Kawempe usually happens in our country, only that this time around, the majority of the media houses put attention and emphasis on the election. Such things have been happening, only that there aren't cameras there. This is Wycliffe, Clifton there. Thank you, Timothy. Lastly but not least, this is James from Budo. While Kawempe's issues are significant, similar problems have affected elections nationwide. Even the NRM stronghold of Kisoro, as Professor put it, we are assumingly getting used to violence. Alarming that some NRM stalwarts seem to be unaware of the issues of the risk of flawed intelligence leading to unnecessary military action. NRM leadership and the presidency must initiate a national dialogue or else. Okay? Well done, Timothy. So far, okay. Thank you very much for the vote of confidence. When it comes to Kawempe, when the madness of the entire nation is disturbed, a solitary mind is not enough to say that the man is mad. Okay? Francis, and this is Amon Musimenta watching from Kabale district. Thank you very much. Okay. Lastly, Emma from Palisa says, the president should know that the people are working, the people he's working with, people like the Prime Minister, Minister Balam, all the dues within the NRM, the musicians working with the interests for just whooping money, they will win Kawempe North. But the beating of the people and stuffing of votes, that's shameful. Okay. Quite a number of messages that have come through. We'll leave the rest there. Let me get to the panelists here. I'll give each 2 minutes to give their parting shots. I'll start with Professor, Council, Waiswa, Captain Francis Babu, and lastly, Honorable Kakoza there. Professor, over to you.
Yes, thank you very much, Timothy. It has been a great show. And for me, in terms of my parting shots, I just have 3 things to say. One, we should not judge our societies on foreign standards. I think it is important for whoever is going to run for elections and whoever wants to make sense of those processes to ground themselves in the material realities of the people there. So as my neighbor here was saying, if people in the community, what they are lacking is a road, what they are lacking is security, even something as simple as firewood can become a political issue. And I think if our leaders anchored themselves in the issues of the people, we would have no time to talk about other people. Because everyone will come and say, I'll bring the road today, another one, I'll bring a road tomorrow, and somehow the road would come. So we wouldn't be talking about John is better than Peter, and therefore if you vote that religion, this one will be better. So I think as we should not be too elitist and think that because the people who are in the electorate are not framing the issues the way we think they should be framed, therefore they are not issues. That is one. And as I said before, I think for me all these crises provide an opportunity for improvement, and I'm hopeful that 2026 we are going to see more improvement, whether people have gone to court or they have not gone to court. But in all these things, I think we need to improve production, economic opportunities, and resources. I know the PDM pillar number 1 is about agro-industrialization, it's about production. We need to take this seriously. All the identity politics you're seeing, whether we are youth, whether we are elderly, whether we are NRM, or we are opposition, or we are this, is largely because people do not have resources. People are trying to organize themselves in ways that will access them, these resources. But how about if we widened the pie? If we increased the resources? Probably people would even go beyond those identity politics like we are seeing. Like I can assure you from my documentation of the last election, it was not very much about tribe and religion. It was around economics. It was around jobs. It was around whatever. So once we increase the pie and provide people with more resources and production, and people engage gainfully in these things, people are not going to talk about who is who. They are going to talk about taxation. They are going to talk about processing. They are going to talk about markets. So I think let whoever is going to go into the electoral processes of 2026 come with a mindset of improving opportunities for the people, not handouts. You go to parliament and then you disappear from the people because you never had a serious agenda for them. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Nick, I hope you can add something about, you talked about 8 months of Kawempe North. What can be done about by-elections, especially how wretched they're becoming?
No, I don't know if I have the answer to that, but I think that holding an election 6 months, 8 months to the end of the term may not necessarily be the best use of resources and our time. But let me just push back a little on this anti-elite, anti-intellectualism in the politics of the country, and the sense that they are disconnected, they don't know what's happening. You don't know how many calls I get from my village. I'm picking up a lot of the problems in the village on a daily basis. It's what now has been called the black tax. And so if I qualify to be an elite, I am not so removed from the suffering of my people. In any case, those things end up at your doorsteps. When somebody has no medical bills, they'll call you. No school fees, they will call you. Burials, weddings, all kinds of things. And so there's a deep connection at a social level between those you construe as elites and their own rural communities. Yes. They understand the nerve center and the issues that press their communities, because oftentimes people run to them to solve them. And so, but the second thing is this, that you would think that the philosopher King was the one shaping public thought and processes. Yeah. This idea that we must now look at them as a problem and as, there's a place for Professor and her data and her deeply well-researched and balanced inquiry into electoral processes. That's an elite enterprise. And so I don't think we must brush aside and claim that elites don't play any role, being disconnected.
Believing that those issues are also issues. They all come to all of us, by the way. Yeah. So we validate them. The issues, we should not disregard them simply because they are not issues in the way we think they are issues. Yeah, they are issues. That's why they come to us, and that's why we resolve them.
True.
Yes.
But the broader point that I was making in that regard is that I don't know if people pick party manifestos in that village and vote based on the issues articulated there in the party platform, because the party platform really should be the issues on which the party is running. People's choice for parties sometimes are based on other issues. There are also issues, but there are other issues, not the one articulated in a party manifesto that you think a party should be able to run on. But lastly, we only have one country. Elections are a process to make the country better. Unless you have a possibility of meaningful change through electoral processes, you're going to have people frustrated and getting radicalized. Our problem as a country is that there's just no certainty. Elections are just a ritual, at least for the presidency. At the local level, there's a very high attrition rate, but for the presidency, for as long as President Museveni's name is on the ballot, nobody conceivably in this country believes that you can lose the election. Okay. So unless you create certainty, there has to be a real meaningful sense that he can lose the election and that somebody else can win. But if you don't have that certainty, you're going to have these kind of, hotly contested processes that lead to skirmishes and violence that you're seeing.
Meaningful change.
General Museveni said that Africa's problem was leaders who overstay in power. And of course, we had a constitution, and that had been answered. People like Kakoza still came out, tied themselves with banana leaves, and gave him leeway until he dies. And now what he told the world comes back to bite us as a nation, that leaders who overstay in power. Because at the tail end of whatever happens, everybody is working towards the longevity of that person. Whether that person is still on issues, that person will still be a darling because he has amassed a lot of power, over time, and people will only, it will be appeasing the person in charge rather than facing the truth. There is always that thinking that it is only those in power that have issues and discuss issues, and the rest are discussing the politics of identity. Who are the people who have been at the forefront of this politics of identity? Let us look at the allocation of jobs. Who are the people in these offices that matter? Who are the people in who are getting the scholarships? This is the question, the issue of land. Who are the people grabbing the land? The country has actually descended not into identity but nepotism. People around the president. If you do not have the first lady, you have the first son. If you don't have the first son, you have the first moko. If you don't have the first moko, and you will not alienate the country from speaking about those individuals who have overstayed themselves around and messed up a nation. And then you turn around on national TV and discuss politics of identity, yet you have been the astronauts of the politics of identity.
Okay.
And that is unacceptable. Thinking that other parties do not have issues. We have issues. We have preached about a new Uganda, an equitable Uganda, a Uganda that follows the law. Let me tell you, all of us here have been discussing about, we know in the mind that government, the NRA and the state are planning to frustrate Honorable Nalukola's swearing in. Now, you cannot frustrate somebody who has been declared by the Electoral Commission unless you have a court ruling. But the shenanigans, the machinery is sitting around to still topple the Constitution like they have raped it before on age limit, like they have done the same on term limit, and even on swearing in an MP. It comes with isolation, the 8-month and 6-month, because that person representing, the Constitution says that 6 months to the general election. That's the window period. Because 6 months without a representation, Kampala is not like other areas. Kampala is actually underrepresented in accordance with the Constitution. If you look at Kawempe, there are over 200 and something voters. Our Constitution says that a constituency will have not more than 140. You know, there are constituencies that have even 2,000, 3,000. So that disenfranchisement also is what must be answered about the election processes, where the Constitution has been abused to create more MPs for particular sides than other sides, and then somebody discusses the politics of identity. In Buganda here, what's the population? What's the population in Western Uganda? Who has more members of parliament than the other? So if we are going to be equitable in our discussion, if we are going not to run around with intellectual dishonesty about the mess in this country, then we must be blunt about it. Just today, Bright Muhumuza, our national coordinator in Mbarara, has been abducted.
Okay.
Now, when you are in a country where opponents are being abducted for the state on behalf of the ruling party, then the ruling party is asking for people to discuss issues. When the opponents are being murdered, are the murdered people, are the dead bodies going to discuss issues?
Alex,
for us who are still alive, we'll definitely...
Let's pick it up another day.
The rest of us, as I conclude, the rest of us will definitely speak to those in power, individuals who have decided to descend on the citizenry, but also will stand for those that have been murdered and no longer have a voice.
Thank you. Captain Francis Babu.
Yes.
Your parting shot.
Yeah, there's a word in English. I'll try to define it. Remember again, it's called greed.
Greed or greed?
Greed. To be greedy. Yeah. Gluttons. Yeah. They are greedy for power. Gluttons for power. Time has come. Power is something you should use when you have it to create a good environment. If you've got power and you cannot handle it, time comes that when you handle it elusively, the rule of karma comes back to you, no matter what you do. A lot of these things that are happening, I laugh. Because the same, my friend earlier on talked about the NRM party, the kind of fighting they have, infighting they have within the party, and how they are forming more independence than any other party. What I see coming up, and I pray it doesn't come up, Ugandans will be tired of choosing parties and they will start choosing independent candidates. And this is my way. So during this time, and the
Once the term democracy of the party doesn't come to
yeah, yes.
It's a serious issue.
Between now and this coming election, we should sit down and reflect on all these problems and try to find a solution. My teacher told me many years ago that when you have a challenge, you must get a solution. We now have a challenge. Can we get a solution?
Okay. Lastly, Honorable James Kakoza, your parting shot.
If history is forgotten, the future is lost. This country belongs to all of us. And really, in the multi-party setting we are in now, you should upgrade to another level. If we are still doing what we are doing now, I think it's not healthy for this country. And I think there is a room for improvement. Each a party which wants to capture power, give internal democracy within yourselves, because if you capture power, when your internal wrangles are still there, you'll get a problem.
Okay.
You will not survive it.
Thank you.
And I emphasize it. I emphasize it. Ugandans you see there in the public, the moment, even if you're in power, even if you're not in power, you start politics of identity, it's outdated.
Thank you.
Trust me.
Let me read
It's a fact.
just two burning messages. In Kiruhura, by 10 a.m. voting and counting was complete. The army ticked the whole booklet. The real mess for Kawempe is a shame. This is Agava from Kiruhura. Okay. Someone else sends a message to Waiswa and says, this is Ken from Democratic Party, says, the number of people in voters in Kawempe went up by quite a significant number. This protest vote in Kawempe, shall we see it translate to anything? Anyway, gentlemen and lady, thank you very much. Gentlemen and lady, thank you very much for honoring our invite and coming through. To the production team, thank you for making today possible. We'll end it with this quote: no matter how sharp your teeth are, you can't bite water. Good morning.